There's a granny here. We were just talking about how recently it seems as though we've heard a lot of people say that it seems as though the world's getting bad. Mm-hmm. But there is bad, right?
Yes.
Obviously. But there's also good.
Mm-hmm.
But to say that it's never been worse is to undermine all the bad things of the past, which you can say that maybe was worse. And I say this because how can we say that it's getting worse now when you're living with all these comfortable amenities? Mm-hmm. As help me out here, in your AC.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, your AC.
With a Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to communicate with others so easily. And so in some ways that can contribute to it getting worse, right? Because you can say if you're consuming the wrong thing, then it can lead you down a dark path, mm-hmm. which is true. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it in fact is getting worse? Because I'm talking about this as though what I'm saying is not law, right? I believe what I'm saying to be true, but I can be completely wrong. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I believe it's due to the news channels of why people probably are thinking it's getting
worse.
worse.
I can see that, how people can think because of news media it's getting worse, because the news can sometimes, not sometimes, it seems like it's all the time. Mm-hmm. It now seems as though it's only that, and you get
negative.
Yeah, you get their version of what the truth is instead of what the actual truth is. And because of that, it could be, man, that rooster's loud.
The rooster is roostering.
Yeah, the rooster's roostering. And so, where was I at?
About the news media.
Yeah, and how it's
making you lose your train of thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and how it's
always
somebody
negative.
Somebody can say that it seems as though it's getting bad when they're only being fed bad things. Mm-hmm. Because rarely will the news actually show something good. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when it's something that's not that bad, it's also something that's not that valuable either.
And it's brief that they talk about it.
As, for instance, a celebrity's birthday or something that is completely irrelevant to the general population. And so I can see how one could think that it's getting worse, but I believe that it is not. And I say that knowing I can be completely wrong. I just say this because it's to me, it's quite arrogant to think that all of a sudden now it's getting worse than it's ever been. Again, undermining all these bad things that's happened in the past, because there's been,
that we haven't seen.
Yeah, that or haven't lived, and that our ancestors before us, I'm sure, just from what I've read, seems as though they've had it rough. But I say this because but I say this knowing that I didn't only read bad things about it, right? Because you could say, well, hey, what about you? What if you only read bad things and you believe now that what you were told about things then was worse, and so because of which it's now actually worse than it has been? And because one could say the same thing, but I didn't only read bad things. And so, I just wanted to touch on that, just because I I'm reiterating myself at this point. We were talking about that,
Yeah.
and it just was hard for me to believe that in fact people saying now that it's true. And this is not everybody, right?
Well, I have a family member that always says.
Yeah, it seems as though it's been
the world's getting
pretty
worse.
frequent, and
And if
I don't
the
feel.
world's gonna
I don't
end
think it's
soon.
been. I don't think it's been getting worse. It's been always both. It's always been good and it's always bad.
It's always going to be
And
that
hopefully
way.
you could just idle in the middle where you don't experience too much bad and too much good. And you need that because you have to have a balance. Because if you only experience positive
All the
and not
time.
negative, then you wouldn't know how to appreciate something good if you only live good. Rather, instead, if you live bad things, which is unfortunate. I'm not saying everybody should live through bad things so they can appreciate a good thing,
happens.
but it does happen.
As long as you're alive and living, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And so,
But I definitely think the news media, they don't help at all.
no, it doesn't
That's what we
help.
just talked about.
And
And I try to stay away from watching news media
yeah.
as much as I can, just because I don't like.
Yeah, but
Hearing all the
you also
negative.
don't want to be in a bubble where you isolate
you
yourself
don't.
from everything else, because you just got to do your own digging, do your own research, and
Mm-hmm.
become. But at the same time, is it even worth becoming hip to whatever's going on if it doesn't somehow affect? I mean, it does, right? Because what happens in governing will ultimately affect me, but for the most part, for as long as I live, not necessarily everything that has happened in news without me has truly affected me.
Yeah.
And so what's the likelihood of it now happening?
it
Not
may-
saying that it won't happen, because it can happen.
Yeah, it may affect you briefly, but then you're kind of like, okay. I mean,
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying, if I was to keep up with the news all the time,
as some people do.
yeah, it could consume you
Yes.
just as gambling could.
Yes, and then that's when you would start to think, oh yeah, the world's getting worse. It's only getting worse. If you're
Yeah.
always watching.
But then at the same time, it's everything, right? Because you could try to do, I mean, let's say, for instance, if you just try to stick on the positive note and all you want to do is learn. But what if you learn so much that it keeps you away from building relationships? But that's true in some ways, but not always, because maybe some people don't want those relationships because they're introverts. And I understand that, because I'm somewhere in the middle where
Yeah, for sure.
I can appreciate going out, rubbing elbows very briefly, but then I'm quickly fatigued and ready to
Me
come
too,
home.
For sure.
So, yeah. Anyways, yeah.
What's your opinion?
Yeah. What's your opinion? What do you think? I'm completely wide open. I don't think my word's law, and I'm just saying this knowing that I can be completely wrong, and
You can also be completely right. Just kidding.
can be completely right.